Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of the College Football Smoak Break Podcast. I'm Craig Smoak with 365 Sports and Rogue Media here on this channel with you a couple of times a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays to talk the sport that we love more than any other, college football and all its glory, although in a bite-sized package as we are with you 15, 20 minutes, and that doesn't give us a lot of room to BS today because there is so much coming out of a magnificent Week 7 to talk about and to cover, whether it's the results themselves, of which there were many that were interesting, or the after effects like the additional coaching carousel spots that we now have to talk about over these next few weeks. 3 jobs opening up. None of them completely shocking, but the timing surprising, and certainly one of them is not like the others. It is a big boy job that is sure to have a lot of interest and is sure to have a lot of talk about it now and moving forward. But how did we get here? Where are we exactly here in week number 8 as we get ready for another massive schedule? Well, let's take a look back at this past week and into some of the games of interest that were on our minds most of all. And it all started off with a game that I know I talked about and talked up quite a bit because I knew how exciting it was for the people in Denton, Texas, and that was UNT at 5-0, welcoming in number 24 South Florida, whose only loss on the year was to a very good Miami Hurricanes team, and a game that actually played out and was relatively entertaining in the first half. 21-all there at halftime, was completely taken into a different direction there in the third quarter as UNT did just about everything you could do to try to lose a game in which you're trying to play for the upset. A horrific third quarter and just overall a really bad second half. Lots of turnovers, lots of mistakes, self-inflicted, and also just great plays and great play overall by South Florida gives the Bulls a lead that they would not look back from. 63-36. South Florida not only maintains its spots in the top 25, but hands UNT its first loss of the season. And for the first ever sellout crowd for UNT there at their stadium, and the biggest game that they'd had in 10 plus years, this was a massive disappointment for Eric Morris and company. Drew Mestemaker, a lot of talk about the young quarterback coming in, and he had some big mistakes in this game, but great win for South Florida. Disappointed it wasn't more competitive into the second half, but that was a game I was very much looking forward to, and hey, it played out the way that it did, so congrats to the Bulls, who are well on their way to maybe representing the G5 in the college football playoff. Elsewhere, some of the games we talked about last week that were of the most interest, and man, there were a lot of them, but Indiana stunning me, but maybe not a lot of other people, with their upset win over Oregon in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. And that was what was surprising to me. It's not that Indiana won this game necessarily. It was the way they went about doing it, just so very Big Ten-like and methodical and physical. And what a pickup Mendoza was for the Hoosiers in the portal this offseason, among others, but one of the best quarterbacks in the country, who got talked about a little bit this offseason, but not a ton, especially not in comparison to some of the more high-profile quarterback pickups. But there were plenty that said, hey, that's a nice one for Kurt Cignetti and company. You wonder how they followed up last year. Well, they're doing amazing, darling. 6-0, 3-0 now in the Big Ten. And Oregon, with that first loss, now it goes back to the drawing board, still very much alive in everything they'd want to be alive in at this point. But that was just super impressive by Indiana, who really impose their muscle at times on Oregon, and it's just a really good football team with a head coach who can maybe rub you the wrong way depending on if you're the opponent, especially, but certainly a big, massive win for the Indiana Hoosiers there, as they are in the driver's seat when it comes to the Big Ten. Ohio State had no problem dispatching Illinois. Didn't really talk about that one much because despite the number 17 next to Illinois' name and home field advantage, the Buckeyes are in just a different stratosphere. So they have company there in the Big Ten with the Indiana Hoosiers, and looking forward to seeing how that race continues to play out. And Oregon still around as well. A nice win over Florida. Took a little while to get some separation. Low-scoring game, but that Aggie defense is for real, and they've got just enough on offense to make them a dangerous team. Looking forward to the rest of the way for the Aggies as the SEC schedule continues on, but feel good about going to Arkansas. I mean, you never know, of course, but got LSU on the road here in a couple weeks, Missouri on the road here in a couple weeks, and then Texas at the end of the year on the road as well. So 3 massive home games against top 25 teams. Still await A&M, but a really nice win over Billy Napier and the Gators. And surprisingly enough, Billy Napier not a part of the coaching carousel news, despite there being multiple openings this week. But really like what I've seen from A&M. Oklahoma, Texas, obviously one of the headliners. And I picked Texas going into this game in part because of all of the John Mateer conversation. But I think this didn't exactly play out the way most anticipated. It had been one thing if John Mateer had not played well and it had been due to injury, but he just didn't play well because he played a bad game for John Mateer standards. You can't turn the football over the way that he did. You can't make some of the mistakes that he did, and you just give a ton of credit to Texas and to the Texas defense in particular. I think Oklahoma, whether intentionally or unintentionally, found a way to make this an easier game week for Texas by taking all of the pressure off of Arch Manning and allowing it to be focused directly on their quarterback and his health and will he, won't he, and if he does, how well will he, and all these types of questions. All of the talk last week about John Mateer and not the guy who we talk about all the time in Arch Manning. It was a perfect spot to be in if you were Texas, where you weren't some gnarly underdog, but you were just kind of taking a back seat to the conversation about your opponent. And then when the ball got rolled out there, a low-scoring, physical, nasty type of game where both offenses struggled against 2 really good defenses, but ultimately Texas, with the big special teams play, the type of play that you need to have happen in this game with the turnovers, the kind of things you need to have happen to tip the scales, Texas with just a better game overall, particularly in that second half and that 20-0 shutout, really leaving Oklahoma fans heads lowered, leaving the Cotton Bowl on Saturday, because not only did you get beat, but you got beat convincingly, and now you're fine with just the one loss, but your opponent is still very much alive. You didn't bury them when you had a chance. They've got a win hanging over your head now, and you are no longer unbeaten. And now you're wondering if this is John Mateer moving forward or what that's going to look like. But with hindsight being 2020, probably would have been better off just having sat him. But again, that's hindsight. There are now questions that there weren't necessarily before, though, for Oklahoma. They're okay. They'll still win a lot of games, but their schedule does them no favors. So very intrigued by how they rebound after such a tough loss, but a great win for Texas, exactly what the doctor ordered, and did it without really having to deal with too much outside noise. Again, thanks to that John Mateer injury reporting throughout the week. Alabama, really nice win on the road against a top 15 team in Missouri. Love Bo Pribula. Think he's a really good quarterback for Mizzou, but Alabama and Kalen DeBoer able to pick him off a couple of times and able to just pull away there and match scores and just be physical and find a way to win. And it's just so interesting where we are all of these weeks later with Alabama, despite the fact that they couldn't run the ball particularly well in this game. Ty Simpson did have another really nice game, very efficient. And he is definitely a really solid player who is a big part, along with various others, and why Alabama's having the run they're having right now. But it's very interesting when it's a non-Saban team we're talking about. It's very interesting, especially in light of what we were talking about just a few weeks ago with this team. So clearly we were a bit off on Florida State to begin with, and then even more so after they won that game over Alabama, and all of the calls for DeBoer to be fired, or just all of the general overreactions, the death of Alabama football that you saw, all of that clearly just a very much a week one typical overreaction type of thing by college football fans. But still, it's to be expected when you've seen this team be the apple of the eye for the national media for so long. The moment you see a weakness, you're going to go, oh, that's the downfall. But very clearly, we were all very premature. 5-1 now, 3-0 in the SEC for the Crimson Tide. Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a head coach. He's going to be just fine. They're just fine, and that was a really nice win for Alabama. So they are still in the mix and not going anywhere. And then finally, Georgia over Auburn. Really nice win for the Bulldogs. Not without some controversy at times, but just the same way Auburn can point to certain calls made or not made, Georgia can do the same to some extent in this game. And ultimately, you outscored Auburn 17-0 in the second half. So while you did have me almost feeling bad for Hugh Freeze, which is something I never thought I would feel, you did have me SEC officials feeling a little bit sorry for him on Saturday. But I know that cuts both ways, and I know that you did not prevent Auburn from scoring any points in the second half based solely on calls. So I don't think that's the get-out-of-jail-free card that some Auburn fans would like it to be. Instead, posting up a couple of eggs in the third and fourth quarter, that kind of negates any complaints you have, even if you did have some points taken off the board. And Georgia, like I said, also can complain about some things. But a nice win for Kirby Smart. Some of his sleaze was very apparent in that game, the fake timeout call and all of that. But he's a hell of a coach. Georgia, maybe not as sexy as some of the other teams near the top of the polls, but still very much in the mix at 5-1 now and 3-1 in the SEC. And Auburn, well, at 0-3 in the SEC, they are pretty much buried at this point, which leads us to, yes, there were many other games that were of interest, but we simply don't have time to talk about them all. So touching on the high points, Hugh Freeze, a guy coming out of this game where, again, you may feel a little bit sorry for him, but you definitely at now 0-3 in the SEC wonder about what the future holds. Plenty of Auburn fans, if they had their way right now, would toss him out and start a coaching search. They don't feel that it's working out. How can an offensive guy not have a very good offense? Jackson Arnold is downright painful to watch play quarterback sometimes, and really the offense has been tough to watch for quite a while now, going beyond this season for Hugh Freeze and Auburn fans. But plenty of them wondering about the future. And, well, if you're going to make a decision on the future, which it doesn't appear that Auburn's going to do in the immediate next few days or even the next few weeks, but maybe towards the end of the season, when they do, if they do, well, they will be joining a very crowded line as the coaching carousel that got started really as the season got underway. It didn't take long for this thing to start bustling and hustling along. Well, now it's really picking up steam as we've got 3 new head coaching jobs that have joined the carousel coming out of last weekend because of Penn State's horrific, unexpected, just totally uncalled for loss to UCLA over the weekend. So bad that they had no choice but to fire James Franklin. And the writing had been on the wall for quite some time that he was not necessarily on the coolest of chairs. But I don't think anybody could have foreseen a team that was in the second round of the playoffs last year, a team with the type of recruiting and just overall success they've had, albeit without that top-end level of success. I don't think anybody, as much of a hot seat as James Franklin might have been rolling in on, could have possibly predicted that he would be out by week number 8 and that they would have losses to what was previously a winless UCLA team that's now a 2-win UCLA team after beating up Michigan State, but then to turn around and lose at home in Happy Valley to Northwestern right after. So not a surprise that they canned them, just a surprise that we are where we are as quickly as we are. And so a major addition to the coaching carousel this past weekend with Penn State pulling the trigger on James Franklin. And that leaves a massive job now right there at the top of the list, joining the likes of previously announced jobs like in Oklahoma State, like in Arkansas, among others. And that wasn't alone. I mean, James Franklin alone could have been enough to talk about coming out of this weekend and lasted us for a while. But you also had UAB making the call on Trent Dilfer. No surprise with that one, really, at all. Things have been trending downward there for a while, and also a guy that not necessarily is the most likable. But then Oregon State, an interesting job now with their situation in the new pack, but parting ways with Trent Bray after a winless start to the season. No surprise there. So that job not quite, or UAB, obviously to the level of a Penn State or an Arkansas or an Oklahoma State, some of the others that have opened up thus far. But now 3 new additions to this coaching carousel that is getting quite crowded, and pretty soon is going to have to move from a regular sized SUV to maybe we got to get a van to load up all these coaching jobs. But Virginia Tech also one out there that I should mention, UCLA, of course, as well. So it's going to be a busy coaching carousel season, but just unbelievable stuff that we're talking about James Franklin being out at this point. So what a week 7 it was. Some huge upsets. Didn't even touch on USC. Nice win over Michigan. And it all sets up an amazing week 8 where there might be more coach firings. There's certainly going to be some coach hiring rumors, and there's going to be some really fun games to talk about and be played, which we will discuss and look forward to this upcoming week 8 on the next edition of the Smoak Break College Football Podcast. But taking a look back at a very busy week 7, just touching the surface really, but what an amazing weekend it was. If you like what we do and want to support the channel and help us grow it, please hit that like and subscribe button, and would certainly appreciate that. But we'll leave it there for now. Coming back on Thursday, we will talk the games this weekend and the latest on the coaching carousel news. But my goodness, some statements made, some teams taking their first losses that were in the national conversation and will remain that way. But certainly some races upended and changed to some degree, and some jobs opening up like Penn State that you never would have expected this early in the season. What a week. What a sport. Until next time, I'm Craig Smoak, and this has been the Smoak Break Podcast on the Smoak Break College Football Channel.